Oh, two steps at once. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Portinga, use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the coordinators for the Lake Superior Living Labs Network, while being a PhD candidate at Lakehead. And so one of the presentation that we're doing today is sort of part two of two panels that we hosted this week. The first one was on Wednesday, and we had 3 people present about different projects that they did as part of the Lake Superior Living Labs Network that was supported financially through that, and also people made connections through the network that led to those projects happening. So really nice example. And then today we'll have 3 more examples of how the network has supported some different projects of various types. So we're hoping people can see how that can be put into action. Gabrielle is one of our presenters today. You may notice on the Zoom that she's not here. Unfortunately, she's gotten COVID this week, and so she's sick. But we got super lucky because as part of her project, she made a 10-minute video about the project. And so we're gonna show that in just a second. I also have a very short, I'll put the link in the chat for you all to access this yourself. But we have a short 1-page, I mean, it'll take me a couple minutes to read through this, but it's an introduction to the film that Gabrielle wrote. So I'm going to read this and then we'll share screen and let you watch the video. And then I do have permission to share her email address with you if you all had questions that you wanted to follow up with her about. So here we go. Feel free to close your eyes or do whatever helps you listen best. Creative action to heal bodies of water, an introduction to the short film. Paintings, performances, poetry, murals, music, community workshops, all are methods of creative action, in quotes, to further water protection. There are many ways to engage in the water protection movement to continue to express the urgency of protecting our water. Creative action as offering diverse methods of expression to advocate for water protection is one such way. Similar to art activism, creative action is an inclusive term I use to describe the activities of the 8 participants interviewed around the Lake Superior watershed, as not all participants describe their actions as art or only art, but as acts of creation. Similarly, not all participants consider their actions activism. Creative action is used as an inclusive term for these activities. We are quite literally bodies made up of water, as are the bodies of all animals and plants. Streams, rivers, lakes, and oceans are also bodies of water. All require water to continue to subsist now and into the future. Water therefore acts as a connector between ourselves and others. Discussions of water protection is also a channel to discuss intersecting issues such as environmental racism and colonialism. The participants in this study discussed their activities as furthering the need to protect all bodies of water, while also addressing social injustices connected to water issues. Here, ethics is the theoretical thread that connects the themes explored in this project. Ecological emotions, such as grief, anxiety, and anger, water ontologies, parentheses, people's understandings, worldviews, and relationships to water, end parentheses, and diverse creative actions centered on water and its protection. By interviewing 8 participants around Lake Superior and as connected to the Lake Superior Living Labs network, this project, as involving elements from community-based research, shares knowledge that centers the voices of the creative actors around Lake Superior. By centering the voices of participants with one-on-one semi-structured interviews, this project shares a story of a role for creative action, according to participants at Lake Superior, as a way to care for all water bodies. Participating in creative action for water protection simultaneously helps to heal those involved as being empowering emotionally and through creating community, while also supporting the protection, the healing of water bodies such as Lake Superior. By exploring a role for creative action in the water protection movement around Lake Superior, this project aims to support creative action for water protection by centering the voices of those involved, sharing its powerful potential to heal all bodies of water. Okay. So onto the film. The share screen button appears. Here we go. We're sharing sound, and Gavin, you want to just give me a thumbs up when it hits when it's going and you can hear it?
There's mercury in the water. It's too polluted. There's mercury in the smelt. Well, you can't eat the smelts. That's Lake Superior. Like, that's Gitchigumi. That is the biggest freshwater lake in the world, and it's too polluted to eat some of the bottom-feeding fish. That's an enormous warning bell and an enormous sign for us to take heed and to pay attention and to do something. It's desperate moments. We're in desperate times now where we have to do something to protect our water.
Art making is an action and resonates with me and with different people in different ways. To talk about social issues, platform for conversations, it's a platform for change. I consider my work a form of activism because taking up the tools of art making and making art, that is saying I care about something that can be beautiful and joyful and that's celebratory of our planet and connection to community. So I think that is a form of activism. Lake Superior, I want to be part of amplifying for it.
For me, art is the act of creation. So it's the act of doing anything that shifts the story of the world. So that could be creating jingle dresses, or it could be drumming, or it could be singing, or it could be painting. I think everything has a purpose. Most everything, you create to either teach, to tell a story, to pass on knowledge. To me, that's the act of creation.
To me, that woodland art isn't just art. This is an entire way of life. I'm not just an artist. I'm a trapper. I'm a hunter. I'm a fisherman. This is my culture, and this is my whole life. This isn't just art. People say water is life. The science behind it is something that Indigenous people have always believed in. Our legends and our stories tell us the same thing, that like water is life. Science says we're high 90s% of water, and we believe that every living thing is related. Everything is water. The mother water breaks, so she releases water before the baby's born. We're born through water. Even plants, plants have a seed. That seed needs water to crack. Everything is born through water. So it's the easiest and most natural thing to want to protect my culture and to want to protect the water, to want to protect the land, to want to protect the sky. And that's one of the things that I try to show in my art too, is that relationship that happens both ways between things. It's reciprocal. Everything, every single thing is connected. We're all one living organism. We can't live without water. That connection that we have, it's a basis of life. You can't help but want to protect your relatives, and want to protect the things that you're related to, and protect the things that you rely on for life. And that's the concept that I'm trying to gently get across through art.
Healing comes through the grief. It belongs to everybody. It moves through rain and steam and rivers. It's blood. It's the whole planet's circulatory system. That's why the health is so important. It's one aspect affects another.
When I think about water, I think about healing. I think about water being a medium of communication, a medium that we are all connected.
For me, I love immersing my body into water. So inspired by that flow of water, that flow in the water that's in us, looking at autonomy and all the, flowingness of our blood in our bodies. So I think those are very inspiring and inspirational for the pieces that I paint. There's just energy everywhere and it's always flowing. So I just think of that everywhere in our bodies, in the water. I feel so much, when it comes to everything, whether it being good or bad. And I think that's where I try to put a lot of the feelings, or even the things that I can't explain into words, into my art form. I always represent water somewhere in my artwork. Whether it being really subtle and nobody knows, or whether it being yep, that's a lake. So it's scary, looking at land protection, water protection, and all the interconnectedness that goes into protecting. It's all related, and whether it being protecting, whether it being honoring, or whether it being immersing, I think it's all a way of how to express myself.
We all agreed that we wanted the bus basically to be like a beacon or representation of like indigenous culture and just like the land that like surrounds us that like you might not see in the city. And we just kind of really wanted to bring that, you know, sense of home. There's a whitefish on there. I drew a frog. All the animals that are on there are all local around the area. Being able to see art that like you recognize and might like feel or provoke something like within you, I think can be really impactful for folks. There wasn't a lot of prerequisites that you needed for the Mamaway bus specifically, so that was nice because it was accessible, you know, and so we wanted to make our art and the idea like accessible too by it being like so public, by it being on a bus. I think also just to like bring consciousness that we have these beings around like the land and that, you know, they are important and also like need to be protected as well. In my heart, I guess that kind of goes like without saying, but like really it doesn't, and that's important to highlight that.
The tent is a pure dedication to water. There was a spirit that we believed was the caretaker of Gitchigumi, or the caretaker of Lake Superior, and that was the Mishu Pichu, which is the great underwater lakes. And on the other side of the tent, there's a giant sun with that's ringed in red, and there's a red line that goes around the middle of the tent. And to me, that what that signifies is that we call it the path of the sun. It's the Anishinaabe way to walk in balance and connected to creation, and how everything is in balance with the water. Opposite to where the sun is, there's a man and a woman dancing, and they're all dancing in like fiddleheads and leeks and blueberries and strawberries, and there's like wild rice and, you know, all these different edible plants. Like, it's not just protecting the water, it's protecting our food. We also believe that our food is medicine. We're using the imagery of the Mishu Pichu to bring attention to water and to bring attention to the dangers that we're facing right now. He's one of the protectors of the water, so it's very fitting that we're using his image.
So to be able to animate or, you know, take the, like say Lake Superior, you know, and create a big puppet out of it, you know, and really see it and have it interact, like in a show, I think kind of simplifies what really goes on. Obviously, we're all interacting with water, but how often do we think about it? When you see a puppet that represents the Mississippi River, or a puppet that represents, you know, Lake Superior, even if you don't, you know, think about it literally, or, you know, I like to think that it kind of sinks in there. That we grow in appreciation of our relationship to water. And that's optimistic thinking, but it's something to do, you know, that it can't hurt, and maybe it does a world of good. I mean, I feel that for me personally, it does a world of good, you know, and that may get through to, you know, many of our viewers to whatever extent.
I think it's my responsibility, as long as I'm able, to try to bring some hope. Even though I don't always feel hopeful, I can be cynical, I can be angry, but sometimes when I'm angry about things that are happening in the environment, I get inspired to do a project. Maybe the anger manifests a good thing.
Let's look at the people who already are on board, who profess, you know, concern about the environment or about the earth. Well, we need encouragement, kind of fortifying, you know, everybody across the board.
I hope for healing. I hope for people to connect with the land. You know, when you love something, you want to protect it. Or even just like represent it or have a voice for what can't happen in this human way that we communicate. So I think just wanting to honor it, and I like to honor it by painting water in my work.
My partner has a little boy, and I can't teach him to go fishing in the same spot that I learned to go fishing at because the water's too polluted now. And this is Lake Superior. This isn't a small isolated spot. This is Lake Superior. This is Gitchigumi. This is where the history of my people is written on the rocks. This is deeply cultural and deeply spiritual and deeply important to be able to protect this and to be able to just even have a voice to be able to say something about it.
I will do my best as long as I'm here to continue speaking in all the ways I can speak. My ways through art, and I'm proud to do that work.
If we just like connect to the land and respect the land, people could heal. And I think so many people, every single person, I think needs to heal on this earth.
Hi everyone. Sorry. Not sure if you can hear the pup protesting here. So yes, if for those of you who joined us a little bit late, Gabrielle unfortunately is sick and she was not able to be here. So, but she had made that video about the project, so we wanted to share it for folks. That video is available on YouTube, and as Gavin gets going, I'll put Gabrielle's email address in the chat so that if you have any questions for her, you can reach out to her directly. And when she's feeling better, she will get back to you. Great. So I think we should just move on to Gavin at this point, which would be awesome. Gavin, when you've got 2 to 3 minutes left, I'll send you a chat just to keep us on track. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. And I'll try and limit my talking and actually share a link through the chat here for each of you to explore. So I'll just highlight our overview what the little seed grant was, which is a follow-up on right when COVID hit, in discussion with Lindsay Galway and Charles Lefkover, like how do we it hit right as the network started, basically, and we're looking at the way of actually doing work. So the way we did that work was actually through video. So we were able to meet outside, largely one-on-one, and created the sustainability stories, like Superior Labs Network sustainability stories. I see Ainsley is here. She was one of the people I interviewed for that. Such a great interview. Best part. Anyway, it was interesting because as that project happened, both personally in my life, I was going to be a father very soon. Daughter Ira was in utero at that point, and it felt like it was really like so connected to my life and where she's growing up. And as that was happening, I remember talking to both Lindsay and Charles about wanting to do a follow-up, like the idea of justice, to do a justice stories set of things as well, based on learning from sustainability stories, right? So one of the things that Lindsay, Charles, and I talked about was how to do sort of more collective action. I think it's a great segue from Gabriella's, right? That was just wonderful project Gabrielle did there. Honored to go after that here, that setting the stage. So what came out of this was a learning experience, right? I went for one of the small grants and was again thinking through how do we tell a story as a community. So I don't like the word workshop because I feel like we all do enough working and then enough shopping. So we formed the term vision group gathering. So sort of like a focus group, but a vision group looking at justice and looking at justice in a way that is like the Lake Superior Living Labs Network nested layers, right? So what ended up happening in this project was 3 gatherings in late 2022, scheduled based on the cosmic calendar, I guess, between eclipses, solar eclipse on January 25th, 2022, and lunar eclipse on November 8th. And there are 3 gatherings, one looking at ecological justice, one looking at social justice down the middle, and then the final one looking at intergenerational justice. And the idea was to sort of pull together a group of people and to like think about vision like across time, across scale, linking justice with sustainability. So what I'd like to do now is to actually invite you each to explore these gatherings, because one of the mandates of this work as well was to share across Lake, right? Felt important, so much of the COVID work being virtual, to host this here in this hub in Thunder Bay, just with the budget. But it felt important to think about how do we share that across the lake as well. So I'm going to put in the chat a link here. Where's the chat now? There it is. So this is a link to 3, and I'll share my screen as well, just to give the context. You're all welcome to jump in there. So this is on my screen now. I have the chat covering up, covering up. There we go. So this is a 360-degree camera. Was able to come to each of these gatherings, and sort of after that circle, which was contained to that circle, and it's important to be in that circle of trust and not carry pieces outside of that are meant to just be contained there. But after each of these gatherings, the group took a 360-degree photo. So if we press play here, this is our pamphlet. You can go to the ecological justice story, which our questionnaire, what message do you hold for ecological ancestors? So you're welcome to jump in and explore. Sarah McPherson did some just wonderful photography here. So you're welcome to jump in and explore. There's Sue Hamill who co-hosted this opening event. You're welcome to jump in and explore. There are some video pieces at the bottom here of the lake. So that's the ecological justice one. As you jump in there, want to give a few minutes here for us to just explore. In the social justice stories series, right, what message do you carry for the citizens of Thunder Bay? This is a gathering at the West Thunder Community Center. In here, there's not photos, there's songs. So if you press these little pop-outs, there'll be songs. So just thinking through different creative ways of sharing what happened at that event without going into the specifics of what took place there. And then the final one, there's poems. So let me know if anybody has problems accessing the link. And I think I'd like to just spend a few minutes here in silence, where we each can explore the images, the sounds, or the text from these gatherings in a virtual footprint.
Thanks, Gavin. We'll pop back in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'll stop my screen share. And Rachel, if you could keep track of the time, that would be wonderful. Just maybe a minute at the end. I just have to give a little thanks at the end to those that participated.
Perfect. Sounds great. I will do that. Go ahead and take another 30 seconds, folks, and then we'll come back. Go ahead when you're ready, Gavin. I know I got distracted by reading the poems.
Yeah, no worries. I was reading the poems as well. And I just wanted to close this part of the presentation with thanks. And I was in one of the poems. David Greenwood helped facilitate the intergenerational justice story one. And big learning on this project about putting stuff together. You'll notice some people didn't have poems or songs, but that was optional. But also, I should have let people know before that's what I was gonna do, because I did a lot of running, chasing people. Hey, do you have a poem or a song? Yeah. It was incredible when David sent me the poem. It was actually after so Justice Stories. My son was in Ruro. I was working on Justice Stories, and it was after he was born. And the first line in that poem says it's 3:23 a.m. and I can't sleep. And I kid you not, David sent that poem. That is the exact time my son was born, at 3:23 a.m. And I just, one of these moments that's like the journey we're on here and how to respond creatively. So I just want to close by thanking the network, Charles and Lindsay, for supporting this effort. The folks that helped facilitate Sue Hamill, that brought her justice story, Liz Esquega, Terry Lynn Facility, David Green, Manage. Thanking all those people. And I also want to thank, beyond just the people, sort of the larger sphere of works that influence this. See No Stranger, Memoir and Manifesto for Revolutionary Love, My Grandmother's Hand by Resma Medican, and then A Mind Spread Out in the Ground by those sort of informed core explorations into the ecological intergenerational justice. So yeah, thanks for exploring, and I hope that was a good way of allowing the circle to be what it was, but also sharing it in a way that speaks in ripples, amplifies across the nation. Yeah, I think that covers the bases.
Thanks, Gavin. I really appreciate that. I like the chance to explore the 360 tour. Yeah, we just because Leigh's presentation is a bit different, we do have time for a couple questions here. Does anyone have any questions for Gavin? Lindsay had already asked which software was being used. It's Kula. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but
yeah, we kind of know how to use it now. Like those are another technical learning, or we're getting them.
Okay, great. Good.
I do have a question. It's something, you know, seeing the first presentation as well as this one, building hope right now seems to be so important. I can certainly speak on my own behalf and say how much I appreciate the way art and activism can co-align and, you know, help us build community and help us build hope. And I suppose my question for you would be, what lessons or, you know, what actions did you find really helped you build hope, or helped, you know, did you see people really responding in hopeful ways? Because I feel like we really just need to build hope right now.
Thanks for that question. I think that's such a good one. That's such an important question. And I'm actually going to answer it in the exact opposite way of what really doesn't give me hope. I learned through this process, and this was to me the big piece of having done sustainability stories first and wanting to like dive deep and look into justice. I learned through this project, two of the participants who came up through this project were not able to conceive children because of government policy and ecological devastation. And the thing that shocked me the most is just the joy that these two people had, that I was going to have their son in a couple months. Right. I mentioned the books See No Stranger, my grandmother's house. I think honesty is where it all starts. Like even the stages of grief and loss, right? First stage of grief and loss is in denial, in denial. And I think we can look for hope from a place of denial, which is, I think it's important to move through that denial. And also second stage is to get angry and be like, oh, this isn't good enough. Like, this isn't good enough that I was able to have a child, but there are others that aren't. It's not just, right? And then I mean, third stage of grief and loss is depression, right? It's like that. I think we just have to go there, right? To be brave enough to go there and take the life there. And then I think the tricky thing is that the fifth stage is final, fifth stage is acceptance. That fourth stage is the bargaining of maybe we could tweak this or do that. And we need to go all the way down to the find it within each of our hearts. Then the ripples and creating a big learning, a big lesson, I would say, maybe more directly answer your question, of creating out of love, not out of fear for what is lost and what is being lost, but creating a place of love, like waves, right? Like we each have our individual wave. Think of the network this way, like all these 4 hubs have their individual waves, but if you put those together, like the amplitudes, quadruple. So, nested wave. I'd also I'd put it out to the room here. Like I'm not the only one that feels and thinks about this. If anybody else wants to jump in, it's very much the thought of justice stories versus sustainability stories is, well, everybody has a voice, right? How do we see more, right? That vision of how they see more across time scale. I don't know if there's time, but yeah, if anybody wants to just jump in.
I appreciate the reflections, Gavin, on the question. Thanks to Courtney for asking it. Yeah, that's great. No questions from Kelsey, but it's interesting. Nice to see you and what you've been up to. Great. Thanks everyone. We might still be thinking about that to some extent. In the interest of time, I'll shift us into Leigh's presentation, but we should have time at the end for questions for both Gavin and Leigh. So if things are still percolating, feel free to just put them into the chat or hold on to them until we get to the end. But thanks, Gavin. I know you've thought so much about this, so it's so nice to hear about it and see it. Appreciate it.
I'd say thank you. It's fun to share. Like this is a year now, just past a year since, and it was cool to dip back into it. And so
yeah, awesome. Great. Okay, so Leigh, let me give you a spotlight here and go ahead and share or talk as you see fit, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Cool, thanks. Hi, everybody. I seem to be well now, but up until early this week, I had been sick for quite some time, so I'm really hoping that my voice stays with me. I do have a PowerPoint, but I'm really debating whether it's worthwhile to share it. It's not my favorite medium, and I feel like I end up not knowing where to look. So I'll just describe the project. It has a slightly different sort of tonal shift, but a lot of similar sort of heart, I would say, sort of around it. And so for us, so I'm the director of the School of Outdoor Recreation, Parks and Tourism here at Lakehead in Thunder Bay. And much like Gavin, our story the story that ties into this kind of starts with COVID. It feels like lots of our stories start with COVID these days. But we're an experiential land-based program, and so it's safe to say that COVID wasn't exactly a peak time for us in terms of our ability to deliver student experiences that we were, feeling great about. We were like into plan A, B, and C, and sometimes D most days. And, a lot of, as you know, students in Ontario weren't in schools, and that's often where they get exposed to outdoor ed. And so our intake numbers weren't great as a program. And our project that the Living Labs Network supported was a student sharing conference that occurred in March of 2023. So it was really the first time since I started in my role in 2021 that we were able to do something where we brought people together in real life, not virtually. And the goal, part of this was also stemming from a research project that we've been working on with folks in the environmental and outdoor education program at the University of Minnesota Duluth. And they were, through conversation with them and collaboration, we were learning that we were actually experiencing a lot of similar things institutionally. So we were experiencing similar pressures from neoliberal institutions and similar like demographic dips, and also similar demographics in terms of our student body, and all of us sort of recognizing the limitations of a variety of these things and the way they come together. And one of the ways that programs like ours are vulnerable in tight financial times is that, on a piece of paper, we're a pretty resource intensive program. And so if you're a person who's looking at sort of numbers instead of experience, you might, with that neoliberal lens, you might not see the value. And so I think there's a sense of concern and a sense of insecurity as we saw sort of numbers dip. How do we deliver on our programs? Anyway, the student sharing conference that we had was this really wonderful way that we brought together students and faculty from University of Minnesota Duluth that came up on their bus in a snowstorm and stayed here in Thunder Bay for a weekend. Our students ran, and their students ran workshops for each other. Stuff like, how to make pizza over an open fire, to how do we provide like more inclusive programming for folks with hearing impairments, lake surfing. Like the door was wide open for our students. Another one of the students talked about sort of inclusion in terms of size inclusion and larger body people in the outdoors. So we had this really great opportunity for students to share. And then at the same time, we simultaneously did a research project as faculty and staff to look at, not a SWOT analysis exactly, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but similar, to talk about what can we learn from each other and how can we sort of mutually support each other and move through that. The students also ran hands-on workshops for each other. So they did like a hiking excursion morning. We went skiing with some of the students. So it was just like, there was a whole lot going on, but it was felt like a huge victory in terms of actually being able to provide a great experience to a group of learners who want experiential learning, approaching it from this cross-hub model, then doing some research, which we then went on to present. So we presented a bit about this at the CTU Expo, but then we went to the Association of Experiential Ed in Madison, Wisconsin in November to present on the earliest findings of our research. So I think I'll stop talking and just be available for questions if folks have questions about it. I feel like I might be missing a big piece Friday afternoon, but I'm generally a pretty open and kind person. So if you have questions or nudges that you'd like to remind me to speak to, Rachel, just let me know. Yeah, we were excited to be able to do this.
That's great, Leigh. Thanks so much. I don't think I missed it. Lindsay has a question. This was sort of also reviving a gathering that had happened previously. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So about 10 years ago, this conference used to happen with a reasonable amount of regularity. Yeah. So there was this Lake Superior Student Sharing Conference. I don't know if they called it that before, but it was something that happened with a different faculty complement. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Lindsay, go ahead.
Thanks, Leigh. And first I'll echo, Leigh is very kind and very open and very lovely. Or repeat that. Also, I've been really sick since getting home from a week off too. So lots of sick people and bodies. That's such a shame to hear, but I hope others are feeling well on the call. But my question, Leigh, I was just wondering, like, what kind of support, guidance, or direction were the students who ran the workshops for one another given? Or was that just sort of blank page as well? Or was there guidance specifically on like equity and inclusive dimensions or topic areas? Anyway, so what were some of the front end pieces around supporting the students with that?
So that's really interesting. And I will say that in terms of our program, the students do get exposure so by the time they would be in 4th year, they would have had exposure to 2 undergraduate research courses. So they would have be familiar with sort of a research talk. They do tend to be folks who, not all, but many, are comfortable speaking in front of people. We gave them, some sense of like, here's what a presentation could look like. I think the example that was given in the form where they had to submit proposals was something like, I think it was one that was presented previously at one of the conferences, and it was like about slacklining. Like, it was quite not necessarily like that could be an equity topic, but it was not framed in an equity way. And interestingly, and this was something we zeroed in on with the research, many of the students chose equity related topics. Like, if you had to group the different topics into categories, the most presentations were slotted into equity. And I don't know if so my answer to you is like, there was some framing, but there wasn't a ton. It was left pretty open. We did vet the proposals. I don't think anyone's proposal was not accepted. And really the vetting just involved, having them clearly state what their proposal was and the kinds of materials that they would need. So they did need to think it through a little bit. And so, for example, one of them, the pizza making one, we actually turned that into the Friday night dinner. So we went to the student and said, like, are you prepared to lead this for 100 people and make a whole bunch of pizza? And they did. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, so we were really interested in the fact that the equity, that there was such a big focus on equity, and pleasantly surprised, I would say, and across like year levels. So there were like 1st year students, 2nd year students, 3rd year students, 4th year students, all the way through. And so it wasn't like one cohort that had taken one class. Yeah, so that I'm not sure what more I want to take from that in terms of data analysis, but I thought it was compelling in terms of the culture of our school anyway. Did that answer that question, Lindsay?
Yeah, definitely. Just as someone who sometimes organizes those kinds of things with students to sort of, give the landscape to play in, it's always helpful to know what are some of the little points at which you re-engage or provide some guidance or not. And I know your faculty does all of that really well. So yeah, great to hear a little bit more.
And really happy to share those materials if you ever want to see them. Like, most of them are Google Forms or Google Docs, so they're really easy to share. I do think my colleague, shout out to my colleague, Julie Rosenthal, like, she did a lot of work on organizing that stuff with the students. So sort of she designed the form, and she's the one who reached out to the students. I do think we gave them opportunities to like practice, where we booked a room and they could practice in the room if they wanted to. I'm not sure how many of them took us up on that, but yeah.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Tons of work, just everyone, like, FYI, organizing a conference is so much work. I was like involved, but not like at the forefront of the planning, and it was worth it, but it was a significant undertaking to organize even a small conference for sort of 2 days. We also, part of it, I think, was that our initial estimates was that there would maybe be 25 to 30 Lakehead students and maybe a dozen students from UMD, and they ended up with 35. They pretty much maxed out all of their vehicles to come here, and I think it spoke to the fact that people were keen to connect. So yeah, we ended up having to really get smart with that budget, hence the pizza making.
That's great, Leigh. Yeah, that's great that there was so much interest. Where did people stay?
Yeah, So we, part of like the reason there was so much interest is that we were able to keep it like basically free or very, very low cost because of the grant. And then we had another grant as well. So we were combining these two grants. And there's a UMD Lakehead Connections grant in case folks around the table, that's relevant information. And so that was what we were also using. So we billeted students. So faculty and staff, the faculty and staff that came, we put up in hotels, and we billeted students with other students. And that was complex. And I don't know if we would do that again, just because of the complexity. We offered like an honoraria to students who took students in, and we vetted who those students were pretty carefully, because my biggest concern was like sort of safety considerations during after hours and those pieces. And one of the pieces of feedback we got from the students was actually that like the ones that could afford a hotel would have liked the opportunity to get one. So we had sort of been like, everyone would much rather spend no money than money. So let's set it up so that everyone has a hotel. And then there were a couple of folks that were like, yeah, it was fun, but also like I would have just paid for a hotel. So, you know, lessons learned. And I do think like that piece around, you really would have to know your student body in terms of, you know, who are the folks that you feel comfortable and trustworthy. And we got, you know, like, is it a bed? Is it a couch? Is it a sleeping pad? Like, what's the accommodation options? Yeah. So that piece was pretty complicated. And so I think, you know, if and when this happens again, because there's talk this is going to be an every other year thing, but rotating between the campuses. Yeah. So we would host it every 4 years. I think that would be one of our considerations, would be making sure that we all feel good about the billeting, sleeping situation.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
And of course, we had a little bit of a COVID blip right before everyone came. So there was that. There was supposed to be a billeting house that ended up not being a billeting house. And anyway, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Have you just colloquially heard from students that they're like still in touch with each other at all? Or like, is there any indication of that?
Yeah, so they are. And we actually, when we went down to the Association of Experiential Ed in Madison, we took students with us and we drove to Duluth, and then we picked up students in Duluth and staff, and we went to Madison together. So we went on a road trip, and a couple of those students were the UMD students, and a couple of ours were folks that were involved last year. So we've definitely maintained our professional relationship with the faculty down there. We're working on, you know, there's going to be a paper out of our conference presentation, and the students were able to connect, and there was lots of sort of storytelling about that the Canadians were coming, and, you know, like jokes about all the things that they did together. And yeah, I think they have remained like, you know, somewhat in touch, and social media and all that stuff. So it's pretty cool to have fostered those relationships. And then having done the conference in November, there's a regional conference in April. So now the students are talking about how they can all go to the regional conference in April together from both campuses. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Gavin, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to chime in?
I think I probably forgot to mute, but I do have a question, which and I want to say thank you for your trust in yourself and that feeling of, oh, I don't think I want to share the PowerPoint. My question would be just around the planning of these things, because planning is so like, it's such a head. I feel like it's such a head game, especially planning things with other people. It's like, oh, like we could do this, and then reality sets in and stuff happens. My question is, how similar was putting on something like this that was a conference to this sort of outdoor ed work you do, which is improvising and all that stuff, and how yeah, I guess maybe my question is, what is there a story from or what's your favorite story? Maybe it's the pizzas. I don't know. Okay. I don't know if that's clear.
No, that's clear. That's a great question. Let me think about that. I will say that the planning committee involved was a student. It was both campuses, student and faculty. So we met like in the winter term, we met weekly on Zoom to sort out details. what is my favorite thing? I mean, I think the pizza thing was a really, really a thing. Okay, I will tell you this story anonymized, okay? Because like I feel like it's a good story, but I won't use names. So there was this student. I'm gonna call him Gavin because you're here, Gavin. And when we asked students who they would like to billet with, when we said like specifically write their names, who would you like to billet with, and who would you not want to billet with, right? And all the students from Duluth were like, I want a room with Gavin. I want a room with Gavin. Like everyone wanted to room with Gavin. And we were like, who is this Gavin? Like, he must be the coolest guy in the whole world. Like everyone wants to like billet with Gavin. So then Gavin came and like, he seemed like a nice guy, like whatever, no big deal. So we all like sort of had this chuckle because when he came in, we didn't know what to expect, right? And then so flash forward to November, and I was relaying this story to one of the students who was there last spring and then again in November, that we had been sort of like all joking about who was this Gavin, like what was like his really amazing quality. And the student was laughing and she said, well, you know, like he's a really nice guy, and she listed all these really lovely qualities. And then apparently she texted him and told him that all the Canadians, quote, all the Canadians are obsessed with you. Anyway, it's like this is sort of a silly story, but it just like spoke to the relationships that people were building, and the fact that we were able to get to that place of like, for me, like teasing is like part of my culture and the way that I interact with people. And so it was like fun to have this banter where like Gavin was like the coolest guy who would ever come to our conference. And I just think that level of relationship and being able to achieve that level of relationship felt really funny and cute to me. My other story related to planning would be like, again, just knowing what you're biting off, because we basically do run a summer camp in a university program around here, and so we're pretty good at logistics, and it was still logistically hefty.
Thank you. And I almost wonder if that's an answer to Courtney's question too, right? Like when those strong relationships are formed, that a lot of hope.
It certainly made all of us, despite the work involved, despite the fact that we were exhausted, despite the fact that our admin assistant who helped said she went to bed at 6 p.m. the night that the conference ended, it certainly made us feel like, oh yeah, like this is why we do the stuff we do, right? And that feels good, and it feels good to provide those opportunities for the students. So yeah, it just felt, it did feel meaningful, and it felt so much better than having like plan A, B, C, D, E through COVID, which was like as much work and not as much reward, right? We've had all these students come through who didn't get to have a lot of experiences, and it felt nice to be able to give them this really, or to help give them this really good experience.
That's great. Thanks, Leigh. Thanks, Gavin. We are approaching our last minute here. If anyone has any burning questions, go ahead and ask. Courtney, I see your note. We need more summer camps for adults. Yeah, that sounds awesome. That sounds great. Lovely. Leigh and Gavin, if you want people to reach out, you could always put your email in the chat, but there's no pressure to. It's just if you feel comfortable with that. Or if folks want to connect another way. I know some people on the call already know you, but maybe not everyone. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for folks for being here. We can wrap it up and let people get on to their next thing. We really appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, everyone. Great job.
I can stop recording.